Okay, I like Celeste, but it's more than just enjoying a game. While Celeste is one of the most exciting, compelling, and challenging platformers in recent memory, it's largely defined by its successful interplay of game narrative and gameplay. Not just through dialogue, but through gameplay, Celeste conveys a meaningful and impactful narrative about the experiences and emotions of anxiety and dysphoria. The game subverts expectations in its handling of these things, utilizing the medium of game design to assure the representations of anxiety and dysphoria are sincere and productive. Celeste proves the importance of representing underrepresented narratives and intentionality. Through this, Celeste is an extremely important game, one that holds a very special place in my heart. I get excited just thinking about the game because I get to reminisce on my own journey climbing up that mountain. Celeste is a prime example of the meaning of meaningful play. Meaningful play describes a game where gameplay and narrative work in tandem so that gameplay actually accentuates narrative and narrative accentuates gameplay. When meaningful play is achieved, the player has greater agency and feels as if their actions have a relevant impact on the game's narrative. In Celeste, the narrative encompasses themes of anxiety that are affirmed through gameplay. Because of the game's high difficulty level, it's natural to feel unfulfilled or depleted when struggling to overcome an obstacle. That's the same emotion that Madeline is feeling when she climbs the mountain. But this difficulty isn't there to constrain the player, rather it is a tool to reflect the challenges of overcoming anxiety, particularly in the lens of being transgender. From the beginning, the game provides an affirmation, telling the player, "You can do this." A message that should resonate with every player when they struggle to overcome an obstacle. The game does not punish death, nor does it reward death. It merely acknowledges it while pushing the player to keep trying. Indeed, Celeste's difficulty could have been frustrating if not for the ease in which the player may continue to play. When a player dies, they are pushed immediately back to the start of that screen, immediately allowing them to try again. This form of repetition makes death seem like its own form of anxiety, every new death being the player's own vision about the various ways they may fail, only to ultimately overcome the obstacle. So, despite recognizing all the ways they could fail, the player may still approach each attempt as a real chance of succeeding, knowing that through efforts and repetition, the player will overcome their challenge. This success, after countless deaths, feels like a fitting reward, a burst of joy and relief. Celeste minimizes frustration while maximizing feelings of accomplishment. The player is always urged to push forward. Despite the challenge, Celeste is remarkably approachable, even to newcomers. And for those who cannot overcome the challenge alone, Celeste's accessibility options are exhaustive and remarkable, making an already approachable game even more accessible. This accessibility is crucial, as Celeste presents a narrative that would be productive for any player to hear. The story of overcoming anxiety, improving one's own worth in the face of self-doubt and uncertainty is something worth hearing, even by those who may not possess the ability to overcome the game's challenges. This is what makes Celeste so special. Through its gameplay, Celeste speaks so passionately about anxiety, equipping the player to address and overcome their own. Celeste is a landmark in gameplay and level design, but it's also a landmark in accessibility, narrative, and representation. Celeste employs an embedded narrative in order to create a cohesive, linear narrative experience through which it may poignantly discuss its core themes. However, through a projection of the player's own experiences and identity, it is easy to see the game as a reflection of our own anxieties. Though we may not all be Madeline, and we may not all be trans, we can still relate to this burning feeling of unfulfillment, this lingering desire to prove our worth and ability, even if only to ourselves. There are various ways that we may begin to go about self-validation, whether we pursue creative outlets, attempt to advance our own work, direct attention to personal hobbies, or even, in a larger scale sense, pursue something radically unexpected, something with inherent danger. Maybe we decide to climb a mountain, a mysterious mountain where we feel we may, in some sense, find ourselves. This mountain need not be literal. A mountain can be personal, and it can be personal while carrying the same mystery, fear, and danger of any literal mountain. And when we face a mountain of our own self-worth, it's only natural that we also face our own anxieties and self-doubts. No matter how confident any one person is, there's always that lingering feeling of uncertainty or self-doubt. Many times that feeling can be hidden, but in these extreme circumstances, as we climb our own mountains, these feelings begin to reveal themselves. Celeste conveys a narrative about overcoming a feeling of being incapable of worthless. So in Finding Worth, Celeste represents Madeline's self-doubt as the personified Badeline. However, what makes Celeste unique in its discussion of anxiety is that the game does not demand you overcome self-doubt, but rather that you reconcile with it, acknowledging it as something real while not letting it become a burden to your finding self-fulfillment. Through Badeline, Celeste frames self-doubt as a pessimistic voice. Though the game tells you, you can do this, a reminder that permeates every challenge and moment of the game, Badeline is that lingering voice inside yourself saying, you can't do this, you're not capable, you should turn around, you should give up. After your first meeting with Badeline, a chase sequence begins, with Badeline replicating your exact movements, just a few steps behind you, and touching her results in failure. Indeed, Celeste posits that giving into self-doubt is the equivalent to failure, as this conformity limits Madeline's ability to pursue her goal and find fulfillment in herself. In Chapter 6, Madeline makes a very natural decision, the decision that many of us would make, one that seems perpetually endorsed through media, to let go of self-doubt. Madeline describes Badeline as a reflection of her true self, the one who makes no effort to find fulfillment, the one who thinks she's incapable. She explains that she needs to leave that part of herself behind in order to succeed in her goal. She thinks Badeline has no right to be a part of her anymore, that she's better off without Badeline. But a letting go of our own uncertainty isn't productive. It's natural to assume that a rejection of self-doubt means no more self-doubt exists within ourselves, and therefore we're more free to seek accomplishments. But this is not indicative of reality. Our self-doubt is not something we should let go of. Our self-doubt is a voice that needs affirmation. A self-doubt is a cry for help, this voice that feels alone and incapable and unworthy. Letting go of self-doubt is a weak, temporary, and false solution to a far greater problem. So, when Madeline tries to let go of Badeline, she falls further than she's ever fallen before. A fall that feels like a painful loss of progress in the climb up the mountain. She's separated from Theo, a fellow hiker whom she'd met on the mountain, one that helped her understand her anxiety and how to better manage it. Chapter 6 of Celeste is a poignant and somber reflection of the journey so far. There's an endless feeling of loss and setback, but Madeline still pushes forward, even past her self-doubt retaliating, far stronger than before. Madeline still pushes forward, not letting her self-doubt hurt her. But now, when she finally reaches Badeline, defeated, she does not reject her, but embraces her in a hug. Think of self-doubt as a person, much like Badeline is in Celeste, but separate that person from yourself. Think of them as a separate entity altogether. Their words of fear and uncertainty define who they are. That person is a person who feels incapable and unworthy. They're a person that feels they have nothing to offer to the world and that their life is meaningless. Is that the type of person you would cast away and say you don't need, or do you reach out to help? Madeline's initial rejection of Badeline was a rejection of that person that needed her help, worsening that person's emotional disposition. This, in turn, as Badeline is a part of herself, weakens her. And when Madeline reaches out and embraces Badeline, recognizing their mutual need, she grows stronger, capable now to reclaim her lost progress and continue her journey up the mountain. In life, it is natural to try rejecting the parts of ourselves we don't like, but perhaps it is more productive to look at those parts and wonder why they exist in the first place, and instead make a conscious effort to help bring those parts into a more complex and better whole. Growth isn't a letting go of those negative things, but a transformation of those negative things into something more meaningful and positive. Through that, we may be more equipped to find fulfillment in ourselves. None of these obstacles can be overcome without self-doubt, because if there isn't any uncertainty about our own ability to overcome a challenge, these obstacles in our lives no longer become challenges, they become burdens. Finding self-fulfillment demands a need to push past uncertainty. Celeste only posits that we accept self-doubt in order to overcome those challenges. As Badeline and Madeline reconcile, that emotion she thought was harmful then becomes a legitimate part of her, and Madeline becomes more powerful. A level up, as the game describes it. Madeline learns to love herself, including the parts of her that are uncertain, the parts of her that need the most love. As she continues her ascent up the mountain, Madeline and Badeline work together to climb the mountain, proving her own capability despite uncertainty. As the player approaches the summit of Mount Celeste, there's a feeling of complete euphoria brought about by the reflection of Madeline's journey as well as the countdown of final challenges. This euphoria felt by the player perfectly concludes the various emotions and uncertainty felt by Madeline and the player throughout the climb. But, having reached the summit, Madeline proves to herself her own capability and worth. Reconciling with her own fears and unconfidence, Madeline is able to accomplish her goal and find satisfaction in herself. Through its mechanics, Celeste is able to not only create an engaging gameplay experience, but tell a compelling and meaningful narrative that positively impacts the player. Modern culture has a great magnitude of media tools to convey narrative from the movies to books to theater. Games, much like animation in film and television, is often seen as a lesser tool, something inherently less prestigious than the others. However, Celeste, like many games before and many games after and to come, proves that certain narratives are most effective through the use of certain tools. Indeed, it is not the medium but the content that defines the strengths and quality of the narrative. By utilizing the mechanical tools available through game design, Celeste elevates its meaningful narrative about anxiety, assuring that this narrative is effective. This comes from the perspective of narratology, that the gameplay is used to support the narrative. From the frame of ludology, however, it could also be said that the narrative is used to support the gameplay. In truth, though narratology and ludology reach the same design through different directions, both of these philosophies are inherently intertwined. The experience is not determined solely through narrative or gameplay, it is determined through the fusion of both, equally supporting each other to convey a general experience that is engaging and meaningful. Considering this, one must also consider the success of Celeste's level design, mechanics, and integration of storytelling in order to truly assess the quality of the experience. Fortunately, Celeste is a masterclass in all three of these contexts. The platforming in Celeste is built off of a few very simple mechanics: the jump, mid-air dash, and stamina-based climbing. Through the use of these mechanics, Celeste creates expansive levels and challenges that require the interweaving of these mechanics with additional mechanics explored in each level. The controls are fluid, assuring that movement itself is engaging. Through simplicity, Celeste demands that the player, over the course of each level, firmly understand these techniques so that they may find clever solutions to each platforming obstacle. The instant restart upon death means the player can continuously explore the various uses of these mechanics in tandem to overcome daunting and complex mechanics without the fear of setback. Mechanically, Celeste excels in that every bit of movement simply feels good, communicative, and fluid. Moving between a jump, a dash, and climbing always feels so smooth, allowing the player to truly string together remarkable jumps. By doing so, the player may overcome obstacles and feel accomplished. This also means that when a player does fail to overcome an obstacle, they do not feel cheated. Rather, the game's fairness and tight controls only motivates the player to continue, having understood what led to their previous death. Additionally, beyond these core mechanics, each level of Celeste includes a unique mechanic that is explored throughout the level with increased complexity, increasing the flow of mechanics in each string of jumps and movements. Overcoming the obstacles in each level makes the player feel so accomplished, having masterfully executed complex weavings of mechanics into elaborate jumps. However, the game does not demand this execution without proper training first. Each level serves as an exploration of a new mechanic as well as a training ground for that mechanic within the player's rapidly expanding knowledge. By the time the game asks the player to execute, the player has been equipped through the level to overcome whatever obstacle is ahead. Celeste is a challenging game, but it never feels unfair or frustrating as it constantly pushes you to success and mechanical mastery. Some notable additional mechanics found throughout the game include the Dash Crystal, which resets the player's mid-air dash, allowing them to continue their complex jumps. A bubble that the player can enter and launch in a certain direction. An angry block that the player can dash into to push it into a specific direction. A street-like block that quickly shoots in a certain direction when touched. And a feather that allows the player to smoothly fly through the air momentarily. There are many more mechanics to be found in each level, giving each space a unique identity while breaking up gameplay to create a smoother, more complex, and engaging level. Each level masterfully increases the complexity at the perfect pace to align with the player's increasing skill. Through this, the game maintains a steady flow that eliminates the risk of frustration. Despite being one of the most difficult platformers in recent memory, Celeste manages to still be remarkably approachable and accessible. Simply put, Celeste does not face a player with an obstacle they are unprepared to overcome, even if it takes many, many tries. Celeste also includes an extensive list of accessibility features that ensures that anyone can play the game and experience the game's important narrative. These accessibility features align with the game's core message. It is not only the most experienced and talented individuals who can learn to overcome anxiety and fear. Dubbed the Assist mode, Celeste allows the player to entirely reduce the speed of the game, provide themselves with unlimited stamina when climbing, choose the amount of mid-air dashes they can use, and make themselves invincible. While these features are available to the player, the game provides the player with a message that this isn't the intended way to play the game, and the player was encouraged not to use these features if they were simply afraid of the difficulty. But finally, the game acknowledges that these features are a necessity to ensure that some can play the game at all, and reaffirms the belief that everyone should be able to play the game. This message is straightforward in the purpose of the assist mode while not alienating players from playing the game as they need. Throughout the game, the player may keenly discover additional challenges within each level, from obtaining the B-side cassette tapes and the various hidden strawberries. These strawberries generally do not serve a purpose beyond the pie consumed at the end of the game. The collection of these strawberries is rewarding nonetheless through the clever puzzle and platforming challenges presented. These micro-challenges, hidden throughout the level, demands clever use of the mechanics in order to execute and obtain the strawberry. These strawberries are also occasionally part of the main level path as well, where the player would need to better prepare their jump and execute on various goals within the same obstacle. The cassette tapes, on the other hand, open up remixed versions of each level. This provides the player with more game content, but also provides a far greater challenge than that of the base game, requiring the player to further master their skills while also not alienating the players who only complete the core game. These B-sides are distinctly more challenging levels, but this challenge is a byproduct of more interesting ideas presented within the level design. As the player completes the core game, these B-sides serve as a natural extension of the player's learned ability and increased skill level. However, the most difficult challenge in Celeste is found after these B-sides as the player unlocks the C-side levels. These levels, much shorter than both the core game and B-side levels, are only about 3 screens, but the difficulty is staggeringly greater than even that of the B-sides. These are the game's final challenges for the most skilled players, and completing these challenges affirms the player's complete and total mastery over the mechanics. Like the level before them, the seaside adequately tests the player's abilities, and overcoming those final obstacles is rewarding enough to justify the challenge. While presenting these great challenges to the player, Celeste employs many tools and strategies to ensure the player does not grow frustrated during their journey. Many of these have already been discussed, but perhaps the most substantial of these is the game's magnificent soundtrack by Lena Raine. The soundtrack perfectly aligns with the game's narrative and themes while perfectly setting the mood of each level. Lena's range in style and sound is remarkable, making each level feel unique. Through this music, the player feels excitement when pushing through challenges, wholehearted accomplishment when overcoming them. The music helps create a cohesive experience, and one which the player will never forget. I will always cherish my Celeste cassette tapes as a reminder of the magnificent experience the music helped to create. Since its release, Celeste has become something in culture far greater than just a game. There's a meme that passes through the internet that playing Celeste turns you transgender. The game has become ingrained into queer culture, particularly among transgender communities. This is logical, considering the creator of the game is a trans woman herself, and the experiences and emotions felt by Madeline in her journey strongly correlate to the experience of gender dysphoria and being transgender. Certainly, part of the reason the game has impacted me as much as it has is because I am also a transgender woman who could relate to Madeline's experience. On November 5th, 2020, a day that many in the queer and gaming community will remember, Maddie Thornton released an article titled, "Is Madeline Canonically Trans?" with the first line of this article reading, "Well, yeah, of course she is." The article has fundamentally shifted video game culture and the way that those communities discuss gender and games. I will not summarize this article here, as it is best read exactly as Maddie has written it, but I wish to still discuss the power of Madeline being transgender and the impact that has on the narrative of the game as a whole. Everyone who writes, everyone who creates, everyone who tells stories, they all tell stories based on their own identity and experience, even if indirectly. Simply put, our experiences, identity, and belief all situate how we see the world, so as we create through how we see the world and how we have experienced it. This calls for empathy in the way we engage with media as we engage directly with the experiences of others. Maddie Thornton being transgender is fundamental to who Madeline is and what Celeste is about. For queer people, the narrative of Celeste felt remarkably personal, and to many, it was immediately clear that Madeline was experiencing gender dysphoria. However, to those outside the queer community, this may not be as immediately obvious. As a non-queer player plays Celeste, they will project their own experiences onto Madeline's journey, since this is largely how people engage with media and narrative. However, by doing so, a non-queer person may not recognize the queerness of the story, but they may empathize with those emotions. Even if a player does not understand Celeste's queerness, they may still understand those emotions and become more empathetic as people. We may not be able to connect through experience, but we can always connect through emotion. This is also the reason that Celeste has become such a meme in the community. To those who experience gender dysphoria that do not yet realize that those are the emotions they are experiencing, Celeste may help players understand their own queerness. A person may relate to Madeline's experience, and by learning that Madeline is transgender, understand that that is indicative of their own experiences and identity. People who play Celeste may recognize their own queerness and transition as a result of the experience. This is fundamentally a good thing. Celeste is far more than just a game. It is a means by which players may learn and empathize. Celeste has cultural value far beyond just the fun of being a game, and the game is certainly quite fun. But because of how it enables players to empathize and understand, it becomes something far more impactful. And, much like the experience of gender dysphoria, it was only after time and reflection that it became clear that Madeline was truly transgender. It is hard to properly express the impact that Celeste has had on my life. the impact that it has had on so many lives. There is so much excitement to be had when a game is able to excel in the various ways that Celeste has excelled. This success has further situated games as rhetorical and literary devices for the communication of narrative. It has also further emphasized the cultural impact of games in this context. Celeste is a landmark in game design, and all I can do now is urge you all to take the journey yourself.